Vaquero solitario salva a joven de las cadenas de su padre cruel. The twin suns hung low in the sky, painting the desert world of Caros, 7 in shades of red and gold. Dust swirled in the wind, moving like spirits across the barren land. On this wild planet, few humans dared to travel alone. It was dangerous, harsh, and often deadly. Yet, one man rode steadily across the dunes, his long coat flapping in the wind, and his horse-like walker moving silently on metallic legs. He was a vaquero, a lone traveler whose name few knew, but whose deeds often left legends behind. He rode with calm eyes, scanning the horizon. The settlement in the distance looked peaceful at first glance. Small domed houses, a single water tower, and a few hovering lights indicated life. Yet the vaquero sensed something off. There was fear in the air. The locals moved quietly, their heads bowed. Children peeked from behind walls, and workers hurried along, careful not to attract attention. A cruel energy lingered over the town, heavy and oppressive. The vaquero dismounted outside the settlement, letting the mechanical walker rest near a cluster of rocks. He adjusted his wide-brimmed hat and checked the small satchel at his side. Inside were simple tools, a few rations, and a long, thin weapon, more a symbol than a gun. The weapon had saved him many times, but often it was his mind that did the work. He walked into the settlement slowly, making no sudden moves. People glanced at him nervously, as though expecting trouble. Then he noticed it. Chains hanging outside a small house, heavy, cold, and cruel. They were not meant for animals. They were meant for a human. And nearby, he saw her, an alien woman, young but strong, sitting on the floor behind the door, her hands restrained. Her eyes were wide, but not hopeless. There was fire there, a spark of defiance. The vaquero moved closer, pretending to be a traveler seeking work. "I hear this planet is harsh," he said calmly to a passing worker. "Few survive without guidance." The worker nodded quickly. "Yes, harsh. And some people do not care for others." He glanced toward the chained girl, lowering his voice. That girl, her father?
He is cruel. He keeps her here, makes her do all the work.
No one dares stop him. The vaquero's eyes narrowed. He had faced cruel leaders before, humans and aliens alike. But something about this world, this settlement, called to him. Humans were rare here, but they were known for bravery, for standing up when others could not. He adjusted his coat and walked toward the chained house, careful to remain calm. Inside, the air smelled of metal and dust. The young woman, seeing him approach, lifted her head slightly. She studied him with suspicion. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice steady despite her chains. "Just a traveler," the vaquero said. "I pass through, but I notice when someone is in trouble." "Ah," he gestured toward her chains. "You do not deserve this." Her eyes widened.
You cannot help me.
"No one can, my father. He will punish anyone who tries." The vaquero smiled faintly, a spark of humor in his eyes. "I have faced worse. Fear is a problem for those who accept it. Courage changes everything." She studied him, unsure if he was mad or brave. His calm tone, his steady presence, and the fire in his eyes told her something. Humans were not like other species she had met. They were small, fragile sometimes, but clever, relentless, and unpredictable. Even one could change the rules. The vaquero spent days observing. He learned the father's routines, the guard's shifts, and the settlement's weaknesses. But the father was a large alien, cruel and paranoid. He relied on brute force and fear to control his daughter and workers. But the vaquero noticed something others did not. He noticed patterns, weaknesses in the father's control. Humans thrived on observation, strategy, and clever thinking. One man could turn the tide if he used his mind. Meanwhile, the young woman began to speak to him cautiously, sharing small details of her life. She was clever, quick, and had a strong sense of justice. Even chained, she inspired small acts of resistance among the workers. She hid messages, helped small animals, and tried to teach others what she knew. The vaquero nodded. "You have spirit," he said. "That will help when freedom comes." As the days passed, the vaquero and the young woman exchanged small lessons. He taught her how to read the environment, how to hide from surveillance drones, how to notice patterns in the father's behavior. She listened eagerly, and slowly, hope began to replace fear. Humans, even when alone, had a way of inspiring courage. One night under the twin moons, the vaquero crouched near the girl's home. He watched the father and his guards celebrate a minor victory. Tyrants often did this, he thought. Their arrogance would be their downfall. He whispered, "Tomorrow, we plan. You will see. Freedom is not impossible. Freedom is not impossible." The girl nodded, feeling a spark she had not felt for years. I want to help," she said softly.
Even if it is dangerous. Danger is part of life, the vaquero said. But courage.
Courage turns danger into possibility. The next morning, he walked through the settlement openly, carrying nothing but his satchel and a calm smile. Workers whispered, and some dared to glance at him with hope. The father's patrols noticed him, but they could not predict what he would do. Humans were unpredictable. That was their strength. He found small ways to test the father's control. He freed a trapped animal, slipped unnoticed past guards, and left simple messages that confused the father's men. The father raged, but the vaquero remained calm. This was not just a test of strength, but a test of mind. He knew the father's arrogance would blind him to human cleverness. Inside her home, the girl watched and learned. She began thinking of ways to help herself and others. Humans did not wait for miracles. They created them. The vaquero had no intention of doing everything himself. He wanted to teach her to act, to think, to survive. By the end of the week, the father noticed the disturbances and grew suspicious. He ordered more guards, more chains, more punishment. But the vaquero had already planned for this. He had mapped the settlement, noted all patrols, and learned every routine. The girl, quietly learning, began preparing as well. Together, they would act when the time was right. The final night of part 1 was quiet. The twin moons cast long shadows over the desert settlement. The vaquero and the girl met in secret. He handed her a small tool, a simple, human-made device. "This will help," he said, "not just to escape, but to understand, to think, to act." She took it carefully, feeling the weight of possibility in her hands. I am ready," she said softly.
"Good," the vaquero said. "Tomorrow, everything changes."
Fear ends, freedom begins. Outside, the settlement slept, unaware that a storm of human courage had arrived. One lone traveler and one determined girl would soon challenge the cruel rules of their world. And the galaxy, silent and indifferent, would watch humans once again prove that no force could predict their actions, their bravery, or their ingenuity. The twin suns rose again over Caros. 7, and the vaquero rode silently through the shadows. He was calm, patient, and ready. The girl, chained but hopeful, was learning what it meant to act with courage. Together, they were preparing to change everything. And this was only the beginning. The twin moons had set, leaving Caros, 7 bathed in cold starlight. The settlement seemed quiet, but the vaquero knew better. In places like this, stillness often meant danger. He moved silently through the narrow paths between domed houses, his long coat brushing the dusty ground. Every shadow could hide a guard. Every flicker of light could mean observation. He was careful, precise, and calm. Humans had a way of staying alive where others failed, through patience, intelligence, and understanding the mind of their enemy. The girl had watched him from her window, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. She had never met a human like him. Others had passed through her father's settlement before, traders, visitors, soldiers, but none had carried the calm power of one who understood both mind and body. Humans were small in number here, fragile compared to the giant alien species that ruled the settlement, but their skill, cunning, and determination made them unpredictable, and unpredictability was dangerous to tyrants. That morning the vaquero crouched behind a low wall, observing the father's compound. The alien patriarch was massive, with thick greenish skin and horns curling back from his head. He moved with authority, a cruel presence that made even his guards uneasy. Chains clinked in the sunlight, a reminder of the girl's captivity. But the vaquero noticed something others did not. The father relied too heavily on brute force and intimidation, believing that fear alone could maintain control. He underestimated the power of a human mind. The vaquero's thoughts drifted for a moment, recalling his own past. He had grown up on a frontier world much like Caros. 7, a place where life was cheap and courage was rarer than water. Humans had spread across the stars, settling worlds others avoided, learning to survive and to fight in ways that few could imagine. He had been trained to move unseen, to strike with precision, and to inspire others to fight for themselves. That training was now his tool to save the girl. He had watched the settlement for days, learning patrol patterns, guard shifts, and the father's personal routines. Each observation was a piece of the puzzle. He noticed how the father's enforcers left doors unlocked at certain times, how surveillance drones patrolled in predictable paths, and how the villagers whispered secretly when the guards were elsewhere. Humans had a gift for noticing small details others overlooked, details that could turn a dangerous situation into an opportunity. Meanwhile, the girl was learning too. From her hidden vantage point, she observed the vaquero and tried to understand his methods. She began to anticipate his movements, copying small techniques to hide, to listen, and to think ahead. Slowly, the spark of rebellion within her grew brighter. Humans had a way of teaching courage not through words, but through action. She felt hope stirring in her chest, a feeling she had not experienced since her childhood, before her father's cruelty had chained her spirit as surely as her hands. One evening, as the twin moons rose, the vaquero slipped into the shadows near her home. The girl waited quietly, her chains clinking softly as she moved. He had brought something with him, a small, portable device made of human design, sleek and simple, yet powerful in its function. It could disable surveillance drones temporarily, allowing them to move unseen. He handed it to her carefully. "This is yours," he whispered. "Not just to escape, but to learn, to act, to think. You will need these skills. Humans survive because we anticipate, adapt, and improvise. Fear is only dangerous if you accept it. She took it cautiously, feeling the cold metal in her hands. Her eyes shone with determination. I want to learn. I want to be ready. I want freedom. The vaquero nodded, approving her resolve. Good. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is acting despite it. And you will act when the time comes. Over the next few days, they met in secret, practicing and observing. The girl learned to move silently, to read guard patterns, and to hide in plain sight. She began helping small animals in secret messages, showing that even in chains, she could make a difference. The vaquero taught her how to use the environment to her advantage, the angles of the buildings, the shadows of the moons, the weaknesses in the settlement's defenses. She soaked up every lesson, realizing that humans were not just strong. They were clever, adaptable, and fearless in the face of danger. The father, meanwhile, grew suspicious. His massive hands tightened around the control devices for his drones, and his horned face twisted in anger. He could feel that someone was observing, interfering, undermining his authority. But he could not predict the vaquero. Humans were different. They did not fight like predictable soldiers. They thought, they adapted, and they used every small advantage the world gave them. That unpredictability made the vaquero more dangerous than any number of guards. One night, the vaquero crouched on a rooftop, watching the father's patrols. He noticed a small pattern. 2 guards always left their posts near the back entrance at the same time, and the drones followed predictable paths. Perfect, he whispered to himself. The first step is small but necessary. Observation wins before battle begins. He slipped down silently, reaching the girl's home without being noticed. She was waiting, chains clinking softly. He smiled faintly. Tonight, we do a test, he said. Nothing dangerous. Nothing dangerous. Just to see how you handle the first move. Her hands trembled slightly, but she nodded. I am ready. They moved carefully, using shadows and hidden paths. The girl's eyes widened as she realized she could move without being caught, even with her chains. The vaquero had taught her patience, observation, and timing, the true weapons of survival. They returned safely, exhilarated, but cautious. The spark of confidence grew into a small flame. The next morning, the vaquero explored the settlement further, taking notes, observing interactions, and identifying potential allies. Some villagers were sympathetic but too afraid to act. Others were neutral, waiting to see if someone else would take the risk. Humans often became leaders in situations like this, not through size or strength, but through example. The vaquero's calm presence inspired whispers of hope among the villagers. Even fear could be changed, if guided carefully. Meanwhile, the girl discovered new strength within herself. She began communicating secretly with the workers, teaching them small techniques to avoid attention, to hide, and to pass messages. The vaquero had shown her the power of intelligence over brute force. Humans could survive and thrive because they saw opportunities where others saw walls. Slowly, she began to understand that freedom was not a gift. It was something you seized through courage and skill. But not all was calm. One afternoon, a guard caught a young boy trying to sneak food to the girl. The boy froze, terrified. The father appeared suddenly towering and angry. The vaquero had anticipated this and was already nearby, hidden behind a crate. He moved swiftly, creating a distraction that allowed the boy to escape. The father, enraged, shouted orders, but the vaquero vanished before anyone could catch him. Humans had a way of being everywhere and nowhere at once, a lesson in strategy that the father could not understand. That evening, the vaquero returned to the girl's home. She was anxious, but he spoke calmly. Do you see? Even small actions matter. Courage is contagious. Humans survive because we adapt, inspire, and act at the right time. You are learning. She nodded, determination shining in her eyes. I want to do more. I want to help others, not just myself. Good, the vaquero said. That is why we fight, not just for survival, but for others. Humans do not give up. Even one can change the world. As the twin moons rose again, the vaquero and the girl planned their next steps. They knew the father would grow more suspicious, more cruel. But the vaquero had patience. Humans could wait, watch, and act when the moment was right. Each day of observation, each small lesson, brought them closer to freedom. The girl was learning courage, strategy, and hope, the tools of survival that humans had perfected over centuries in the galaxy's harshest worlds. The final scene of Part 2 shows the vaquero standing on a high ridge outside the settlement, watching the father's compound. The girl's small window glowed faintly below, a symbol of hope. He adjusted his hat, feeling the cool wind on his face. Tomorrow, he whispered to himself, we take the next step. Fear ends. Freedom begins. The stars shimmered above, silent witnesses to human courage. One lone vaquero and one determined girl were preparing to challenge cruelty, injustice, and oppression. And the galaxy, vast and indifferent, would once again see the power of humans, clever, fearless, and unstoppable when they chose to act. The sun rose slowly over Karos, 7 casting long shadows across the dusty settlement. The vaquero crouched on a high ridge overlooking the town, his eyes calm and sharp. Today, everything would change. For days he had watched, waited, and planned. Everybody, after all. He knew the father's movements, the guards' routines, and the weaknesses in their defenses. Humans were not the strongest species in the galaxy, but they were clever. One human, acting carefully and with patience, could turn the tide against even the cruelest enemy. The girl sat behind her window, chains still on her wrists, but determination burning in her eyes. She had learned much from the vaquero over the past week, how to move unseen, how to read people, and how to act without fear. She understood that survival was not about strength alone. It was about planning, observation, and timing. Humans had a reputation across the stars for ingenuity, and now she was beginning to see why. The vaquero descended from the ridge silently and entered the settlement. He walked past villagers who stared at him nervously but dared not approach. Fear had ruled this place for too long, and even small acts of courage were rare. The vaquero smiled faintly, knowing that his presence alone was beginning to inspire hope. Humans had a way of teaching courage without words, simply through example. He reached the girl's home and crouched near the window. Today, he whispered, we make our first move. This is not the escape itself, but a test of your skill. You must be ready. Watch, learn, and act carefully. She nodded, gripping the small device he had given her. It was simple, human-made, but powerful. With it, they could temporarily disable the surveillance drones that patrolled the settlement. It would give them the chance to move unseen, to observe, and to act without being caught. Humans relied on clever tools like this, but more importantly, they relied on intelligence and timing. First, the vaquero said, we create a distraction. Your father and his enforcers are proud and careless. They will react without thinking. Humans can turn their mistakes into opportunities. He led her through a hidden path behind the buildings, careful to stay out of sight. Along the way, he explained the plan. They would move in stages. First, disable the drones near the central compound. Next, slip past the guards near the back entrance. Finally, observe the father's patterns and test the defenses. Nothing dangerous yet, only practice and preparation. The girl followed closely, her heart pounding with excitement and fear. Every step was a lesson. She learned to watch for shadows, to listen for unusual sounds, and to move with patience. The vaquero's calm presence steadied her nerves. Humans had a way of instilling confidence, even in the most desperate situations. She began to see that courage was not the absence of fear, but action despite it. They reached the central compound just as a patrol drone hovered near the perimeter. The vaquero handed the device to the girl. "Now," he whispered. "Use it carefully. Timing is everything." She activated it, and the drone flickered before shutting down momentarily. The guards looked confused, scanning the area. The vaquero moved silently past them, guiding the girl along hidden paths. She followed, amazed at how small and quiet movements could allow them to bypass danger. Humans had survived for centuries on frontier worlds because they understood these principles: observation, timing, and clever action. After several tense minutes, they reached the back entrance of the father's compound. Guards patrolled in predictable patterns, just as the vaquero had observed. "Watch closely," he whispered. "Notice their habits. Timing is everything. Wait for the right moment." They crouched behind a low wall. The father himself walked past in the distance, laughing at some minor victory he had claimed. The girl's eyes widened. He was huge, powerful, and cruel. But humans did not fight like others expected. They relied on speed, intelligence, and creativity. The vaquero had faced enemies like him before, and survived. So would she. Finally, the opportunity came. Two guards left their posts near the back gate, distracted by a small commotion the vaquero had created earlier. "Now," he whispered. They slipped past silently, their movements precise and careful. The girl felt a thrill she had never known. She was doing what she had thought impossible, moving unseen past those who had oppressed her for years. Humans inspired action through example, and she was beginning to understand that power was not only physical. They reached a hidden vantage point inside the compound. From there, the girl could see her father more clearly, and she noticed something important. He relied heavily on intimidation and fear, not strategy. His guards were loyal out of fear, not respect. Humans could exploit this, using their unpredictability and intelligence. The vaquero explained quietly, "See that? Brute force is temporary. Cleverness lasts." Over the next several hours, they observed carefully, noting patrol shifts, drone paths, and weak points in the compound. The girl took mental notes, learning to anticipate danger and act accordingly. She was beginning to understand the true nature of freedom. It was not given. It was earned through courage, planning, and action. Humans had mastered this skill, and now she was learning. The vaquero watched her closely, approving her focus and discipline. "You are learning quickly," he said. "Humans survive not because we are the strongest, but because we think, adapt, and act at the right time. Courage is contagious. You will inspire others, even here." As night fell, they retreated to the shadows near her home. The girl's hands ached from the chains, but her spirit burned brighter than ever. "I understand now," she whispered. "It is not just about running. It is about knowing when and how to act." "Exactly," the vaquero said. "Tomorrow we begin the next step. You will test your skills in a controlled situation. Every small action prepares you for the larger challenge. the moment when freedom becomes reality. He left her with a few instructions. Observe, remember, and be patient. Humans understood that rushing often led to failure. The father, though cruel, would grow more suspicious, but he could not predict the actions of one human who thought ahead. That was the power of unpredictability, the essence of human strength. The next morning, the vaquero returned to the settlement, blending in with the early workers. He noticed subtle changes, villagers moving with slightly more confidence, small acts of quiet defiance. Humans had a way of inspiring courage, not through force, but through presence and action. Even one person could change the mood of an entire community. He smiled faintly. This was a step toward freedom for more than just the girl. By midday, they tested a small maneuver. The girl moved a small crate from one alley to another under the watchful eyes of two enforcers. At first, her hands trembled, but she remembered the vaquero's lessons: patience, timing, and observation. She moved slowly, deliberately, and completed the task without detection. The vaquero watched from a distance, his heart steady but proud. Humans could teach others to act, and she had just taken her first true step toward freedom. The father, noticing minor disturbances, grew more paranoid. His massive hands clutched his control devices, and he barked orders at his enforcers. But the vaquero anticipated every move. Humans thrived on thinking ahead, predicting patterns, and exploiting weaknesses. The father's arrogance blinded him to these lessons. He underestimated the cleverness of even a single human. That mistake would soon cost him. As night fell again, the vaquero and the girl met in secret. She was exhausted but exhilarated. "I did it," she whispered. "I moved without being caught." "You did," the vaquero said, smiling faintly. "Humans do not wait for luck. We create opportunities. Courage, intelligence, and patience. These are our weapons. And you are..." They spent hours reviewing their observations, planning the next steps. The vaquero emphasized small victories, careful movements, and patience. Freedom would not come through a single action, but through preparation and precision. Humans had learned this through centuries of survival, and now he was teaching it to someone who had been trapped too long in chains, both physical and mental. The final scene of part 3 shows them standing on a small hill outside the settlement. The twin moons cast long silver shadows. Below, the father's compound glowed faintly, unaware of the storm brewing just beyond its walls. The girl's eyes reflected determination and hope, and the vaquero's calm presence promised guidance and strategy. "Tomorrow," he whispered, "we move closer. You will act, you will test, and you will prepare for the moment when freedom becomes more than a dream. Fear ends, courage begins." The stars above Caros, 7, shone silently, watching as one lone vaquero and one determined girl prepared to challenge cruelty, injustice, and oppression. Humans had always been unpredictable, clever, and fearless, and soon the galaxy would witness once more what one human could do, even against the most powerful tyrant. The twin moons hung low over Caros, 7, casting long silver shadows across the settlement. The air was tense, heavy with the quiet of anticipation. Inside his hidden perch, the vaquero studied the father's compound one last time before acting. Every movement of the guards, every hum of the surveillance drones, every flicker of the lights had been memorized. Today, he would turn all his careful planning into action. The girl sat in her room, chains still binding her wrists, but her heart raced with excitement rather than fear. She had practiced every move with the vaquero, observed every patrol, learned every pattern. She understood now that humans were unpredictable and clever. Even one human could defeat seemingly insurmountable odds. She clenched her fists. Today, she would see what that meant for herself. The vaquero descended silently from his perch, crouching behind crates and low walls, unseen. The first step was simple: disable the drones near the central courtyard. He handed the device to the girl, whispering instructions once more. Watch the shadows. Time your actions. When you trigger it, the drones will pause for a few moments. That is all the time you need. She nodded, fear and excitement battling within her. Humans thrived on fear. They acknowledged it, controlled it, and acted despite it. She pressed the small button on the device. The nearest drone blinked, stuttered, and went dark. Guards looked up, confused. The vaquero guided her past, moving with smooth precision. Humans had a way of being everywhere and nowhere at once, a quality that often baffled their enemies. They reached the back entrance of the father's compound. Two guards patrolled lazily, unaware of the humans slipping past. The girl froze for a moment, nerves sharp, but the vaquero whispered calmly, "Breathe. Watch. Move when the moment comes." She stepped forward, following his lead, and passed through the shadowed corridor unnoticed. Her heart pounded, but every step was precise. Courage, she realized, was not the absence of fear. It was acting in spite of it. Inside, the girl paused to observe her father. He sat in the main room, flanked by two massive enforcers, drinking a glowing liquid from a cup. His massive hands clutched a control device for the drones, and his eyes flickered constantly to the screens showing the settlement. He was arrogant and overconfident, relying on force and fear. But humans thrived on exploiting arrogance. The vaquero whispered, "See that? Brute strength is predictable. Cleverness is what changes the outcome." They moved through the shadows, creeping toward the room where the girl's chains were secured. Her wrists ached, but she had learned to move carefully, even while restrained. The vaquero produced a small tool, designed to unlock the mechanical shackles. "This will free you," he whispered. "Stay calm and follow my instructions." Minutes felt like hours as he worked, careful not to make a sound. The girl's pulse raced, every nerve alert. When the last shackle clicked open, she flexed her wrists, savoring the freedom, though only momentarily. The vaquero gestured for her to follow. "We move." Quick, but carefully. They slipped down the hall, avoiding patrols and hidden sensors. The father's enforcers had grown suspicious, shouting orders when they discovered a minor disruption caused by the vaquero earlier. But humans were fast thinkers. The vaquero led the girl through narrow ventilation shafts and shadowed corridors, always staying one step ahead. He had anticipated every patrol, every reaction, every possibility. Humans excelled in adaptation and foresight. At one point, a guard stepped unexpectedly into their path. The vaquero froze, motionless, while the girl held her breath. The guard paused, frowning, then turned and walked away. "Patience," the vaquero whispered. "Humans act when the moment is right. Never before, never after." They emerged into a small courtyard, the twin moons shining down. The father's main building loomed ahead, but the path to freedom lay in the shadows beyond. A hovering patrol drone approached, buzzing softly. The girl looked panicked, but the vaquero smiled faintly. He tossed a small device, creating a brief magnetic pulse. The drone stuttered, spun, and drifted harmlessly into a nearby wall. "Humans create solutions," he whispered. "We do not panic, we act." The girl ran silently beside him, heart pounding, feet light. For the first time, she truly felt what freedom might mean. The settlement stretched out before them, unaware that its most cunning prisoner was escaping. The vaquero had taught her not just to survive, but to think, to anticipate, to act. She had learned that courage was contagious, and now she felt it coursing through her veins. They reached the edge of the settlement, where the rocky terrain opened into the harsh desert beyond. The father's enforcers had realized something was wrong, shouting orders and mobilizing drones. But the vaquero had anticipated this. He led the girl along hidden paths, weaving through boulders and shadowed valleys, using the terrain as their ally. Humans excelled where others failed. They adapted to any environment, using intellect and intuition to survive. The father appeared suddenly, massive and furious, blocking a narrow path. "Stop them!" he bellowed. His horns glinted under the moonlight, and his massive hands clutched weapons designed to crush any resistance. The girl froze. She had never seen such raw power. The vaquero stepped forward calmly. "Cleverness beats force," he said softly. Then, with a swift movement, he threw a small reflective device to the ground. The moonlight bounced off it, blinding the father briefly. Humans had long used ingenuity and distraction as weapons. The father roared in confusion, giving them just enough time to slip past. They ran through the rocky paths, dust kicking up beneath their feet. The father's enraged shouts echoed behind them, but he underestimated their speed and knowledge of the terrain. Humans had survived in harsh worlds like Karos, 7, for centuries. They knew how to move, how to hide, and how to turn even the smallest advantage into salvation. After what felt like hours, they reached a small ridge overlooking the desert plains. The mechanical walker, hidden earlier by the vaquero, waited. Its metallic legs adjusted automatically to the uneven ground. He helped the girl aboard, checking her for injuries. "Are you ready?" he asked. She nodded, breathless but exhilarated. "I am. Let's go." The walker moved swiftly, carrying them across the desert. Behind them, the settlement shrank into the distance, the father's enraged cries fading. The girl looked back once, then forward. For the first time, she felt the true meaning of freedom, the chance to act, to survive, to live without fear. Humans had taught her that courage, intelligence, and patience could defeat even the cruelest oppression. As they rode, the vaquero spoke quietly. "This is only the beginning. Freedom is more than escaping chains. It is thinking, acting, and inspiring others. Humans do not wait for miracles. We create them." The girl listened, her heart swelling with understanding. She had witnessed the power of human ingenuity firsthand. One person, patient and clever, could change the outcome of an entire world. And now she carried that lesson forward, ready to act in the future. After hours of travel, they reached a hidden canyon, safe from pursuit. The vaquero dismounted, checking the horizon for signs of drones or guards. The girl stepped down beside him, stretching her legs. She felt stronger than ever, her spirit no longer bound by chains. Humans had a way of teaching courage not just through words, but through action. She had learned it, and she would carry it with her forever. The vaquero looked at her, a faint smile on his face. "You acted well," he said. "Courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. Today, you chose courage. Tomorrow, you will choose freedom." They settled in the canyon for the night, the twin moons casting gentle light over the rocky terrain. The girl looked up at the stars, thinking of the settlement they had left behind. The father would grow more cautious, but humans were unpredictable. One clever mind, guided by courage and patience, could always stay one step ahead. That was their greatest strength. The night was calm, but the galaxy was vast.